많이 먹었지. 이게 이렇게 좋아하는 사람들이 판에 분위기가 소스 버스들이 좋아서 상황을 하면.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. I know that we're starting a little bit late. We want to get moving as soon as possible. So if people please take their seats and we will get started.
Bana ne olacak? Maksimal.
Thank you very much and thank you for joining us after a long day. But we hope that it's worthwhile.
We're not first.
It's going to be a roundtable discussion. As already discussed, creating for our commitment by our team steps. Since 2020. First time the next time officially announced the national power it's the last was building first power now we didn't announce the power rate based on this one based on the survey was done in 2020 because was COVID time. This time, so that's why this year probably those based on power to measure based on monitoring power to and last year our population of the unit started on doing more advanced power to measure, so multi-dimensional power to measure. So the measure doesn't take into account any dimension, but other measures. So one thing that I have mentioned that when you calculate multi-dimensional power to measurement, it is difficult to compare these measurements because the indicator and the preference for the priority will be different. So first, when we discuss with the people, if you look at this different experience or international experience, start to show that in some countries people give more, some countries people give more education, in some countries people give more reference on infrastructure or the utility service. So that's why what will be the priority with Vixen, we don't know yet. So we started our study already. So in the coming weeks, we will start our pilot survey. So this pilot survey will enable us to help and prioritize and indicate how to prioritize. Then we will come up with our survey questionnaire, then according to our plans, we are planning to put out the outcome survey in Brixton, and first time calculate information for children also and multiple households. Basically, our experience is this. So now we have accomplished our living the service operation. And help them mix what we started off with. Yeah, so it's just not it, that's what I've done. I got that. Now, took one and I teacher.
I think I just have a type of state. The government. Environment and many other things. That's well done. I mean, the discussion today. As well as so that the next stage, the measurement on-site, the and we hope that we will have a chance if needed. Unfortunately,
Thank you. Thank you. Let me start by thanking the Center of Economic Research and Reform for the partnership, why it is important, but also ownership of the process, why it is important to us, because when we look at the history of Uzbekistan since independence, so we are observing stages when poverty was not even discussed at all or denied, moving to acknowledging poverty as an issue, creating even dedicated government institutions, but also more importantly for the mandate of our organization, talking about child poverty. And I would like to highlight why it is important. Because when we talk about child poverty, first it remains an issue in Uzbekistan. We started looking at it in terms of the monetary child poverty measurement, but also what we have is global evidence that confirms that young children are 1.5 times more likely to be in the poverty than adults. So general measurement of the poverty when it comes to children doesn't necessarily to unpack and understand what is happening in the lives of children, and linking it to what we have discussed just before this round table of the human capital development and the importance of the demographic dividend and the fact that 1/3 of the population is child population. So looking at child poverty, and especially on its multidimensional aspects that would include, of course, starting from early childhood, sometimes even immunization, nutrition-related indicators, health, and others. This is something that we're really excited about to partner, of course, together with the UNDP as well, so that bringing two different methodologies that we use globally together, we will be able to help the government to produce gender and age-related metrics of the multidimensional poverty. I will keep my intervention very short because I have my colleague who is joining online from our research institute in the Center, who can briefly talk about the methodology that we're using, because MPI was meant to be, and I know there will be presentation of the instrument, but we're using multidimensional overlapping distribution model. So I want him to quickly talk about this before we get to the next issue. Thank you. Yeah, because I'm giving up my time, my slot to make sure that he can quickly introduce that. Are you with us, Peter? I see.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do. Can you take like a couple of minutes to just explain the methodology we're using so that everyone is clear why we have different ones and why it is important to be applied to measure child poverty?
Sure, yes. I'm having some technical difficulties. I'm sorry. I haven't been able to follow the discussion up till now. But I can share my screen and just go through a few key points, if that will be okay, just for 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Yes, but please try to keep it as short as possible. Not
sure.
Long day. It's already past 6 p.m.
Absolutely. I will. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we do. Sorry, I'm the moderator. Yes, we see. Please go ahead.
Excellent. Okay. Well, yes, I mean, clearly, it's well known that there are two common approaches to multidimensional poverty measurement, which had been applied to children. There's the MPI and MODA, which was developed here at where I work at the UNICEF Office for Research in Nugenti. I'm not going to go into detail about the different strengths and weaknesses. The fact is that they're both strong approaches, but they do have some clear advantages and disadvantages. The reason we have used MODA over the years is because it's very much a child-centered approach, and it, therefore, in my opinion, is particularly suited for the measurement of child multidimensional poverty. And I want to just make a few points that connect to that, and I think are fundamental principles that I believe we need to follow in the work we do when we're measuring multidimensional child poverty in particular. The first is that child poverty has to be measured at the child level, not at the household level. We know that there are intra-household variations, that sometimes children of different ages or genders, other factors can actually experience different levels of deprivation. So it's one very important reason that we shouldn't rely on household measures when we're actually trying to measure child poverty. Second one is that I think what we're trying to do in Uzbekistan, and we've had some very good contact already with the government officers on this, is that it's very important that we move away from a kind of theoretical approach and actually develop domains and indicators that develop child poverty measures taking into account the key stakeholders in the context. I don't think multidimensional child poverty can be defined purely on theoretical basis. It needs to be relevant to the people within the specific context. That could be a country or a particular subgroup, and that would be an approach we'd always promote. And within that, I think it's vital that children should be consulted and involved as equal stakeholders in that. So it's very important that when we're developing child poverty measures, we consider how children experience deprivations and what children consider to be deprivations. So they can often be different types of deprivations to the ones that come up in consultation with adults. And we know that from research that's been done in a number of countries. Finally, we need to be aware that traditionally poverty has been defined at the household level, but that not all children live in fixed households. Some children don't live in a household at all. And so it's very important when we're thinking about child poverty measurement that we don't become narrowly focused on households, also because many deprivations are actually experienced at the community level by children rather than specifically the household that they live in. So I think these are a number of principles that I believe we need to follow if we're going to successfully develop meaningful and valid measures of multidimensional child poverty in particular, irrespective of which method of calculation we're going to use, whether it's a kind of MPI approach or a MODA approach. To me, that's less important than following these underlying principles in how we develop and agree what is defined as poverty within a particular context. So that's what I wanted to add into the debate today. I've added my contact details, and you can also take a look at some of our publications using the MODA approach, which are available on our publications webpage. Hope I haven't taken up too much time. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Corinne. So our session is focused on MPI in Uzbekistan. And so really, I will ask questions that are questions often asked as MPI becomes a useful tool. And so the first is, what is poverty here? what are the appropriate dimensions and indicators? They're the food security, of infrastructure, of human capital, of environment, of jobs. All of those are common dimensions and indicators in existing official statistics of multidimensional poverty, which now exists for over 3 dozen countries. And these should reflect the policy priorities, as well as what needs to be monitored. And from this profile of deprivation, we look at each person to see which deprivations they experience and create a deprivation profile for them. And we add up their deprivations to create a score. What percentage of dimensions do they experience deprivation in? So like a monetary measure has an aggregate income, this has a deprivation score. And that's how we can make the most vulnerable groups visible. People with disabilities, the elder population, the children, particular minorities, or regions and territories in districts. If people have a critical mass of deprivation at the same time, they are identified as poor. That way, policy is not spent, money is not spent on people who could get rid of their own deprivation. And this makes MPI a tool for targeting, and as we will see, for budgeting. And then when the MPI is computed, it also shows the percentage of people who are poor, but also how people are poor. Which deprivations are most prominent in rural and urban areas, across territories, etc. So an official measure then can be used for many policy purposes. And Natalie, who will speak afterwards, will describe some of the international experiences. But I will ask questions. When an official national MPI is released, what will the newspapers say? For example, in the Philippines, they say that the Philippines has 2 measures, and this is common, and the newspapers are comfortable. In Pakistan, they also talk about the cost of basic needs index and the multidimensional index. But what will the media say? How will it understand? What kind of journalist training might be useful so that when the MPI is launched, it's part of the public discussion about poverty in a way that's easy to understand. The second is that the government has already set a target to cut it by half. So can the MPI be updated every year so that we can see trends? I mentioned that Bhutan cut its MPI by half in 5 years. But many governments, South Africa, Ecuador, Costa Rica, Philippines, Vietnam, they update their MPI every year so they can track progress and see where to put more effort. How will the MPI be used alongside monetary measures and other national priorities in budget allocation formula? For example, it might be that allocations are not going to some of the poorest territories, or that some indicators like internet access maybe don't have enough budget allocation. So by looking at budgets, you can identify gaps. In some countries, it's a presidential decree that says MPI must be used in budget. In others, it's a planning priority or formula. But how can that be used? Because we are all fiscally constrained. There's not enough money. So how can we be most effective? Another question is targeting. In Colombia, households are targeted using the MPI, and they leave that targeting when they graduate from multidimensional poverty and monetary poverty. So how can the MPI support targeting in Uzbekistan? And also in some countries like Panama, they found the indigenous comarcas had 90% of people being poor, whereas in Panama City, it was 8%. So maybe geographic targeting for some groups is useful. Where will that be useful here? And then we mentioned coordination. We mentioned the example of Colombia and leadership to coordinate. And just to give you an idea of how it works in practice. Each year they would see if they had met their target for that year. And they would look at the indicators on the bottom that were not going as fast as they needed to. And they had a little bit of flexible money. And they said, how should we spend it to accelerate progress in those indicators? And these slides from government of Colombia show how year by year they found what was not moving, and they had a responsive policy so that they met their targets. So how could that be adjusted, adapted to work here? Another is the poorest. So the sustainable development goals, as well as priorities, are to look at the poorest of the poor. And in Nepal, for example, Karnali and Province 2 had the highest rates of poverty, but they also had the fastest reduction in rates. So like this, we can see the children who are the poorest in every national MPI are having positive reduction by the national and by child conventional measures. And the last, some countries educate their girls. Some countries involve private sector. Some countries have faith-based groups. Poverty strategy. Already well developed. But how can the MPI, in a sense, be a part of this process? So these are the questions that either technology to the needs and possibilities and the commitment. Finally, I would say that many governments have official measures. South-South network, and they will be very interested as we develop Uzbekistan to find out more, to learn from you, to invite you to speak at UN General Assembly and at different events, because this will be a very in the region of work on multidimensional growth. I'm sorry it took so long, but thank you so much. I'll just sit like this. I was just saying, thank you very much for the intervention. I think other countries innovating. I think now we have the line is that. So I think we have now Natalie, who is the
Senior Strategic Advisor on Inclusive Growth at UNDP. and who is going to help us, as Matilda mentioned, with our soft launch of the second version of the handbook, joint UNDP and OFI, that is about the policies of multidimensional poverty indices. Natalie, can you hear me?
Yes, Corinne, I can hear you.
The floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think someone has to sort of put this slide on the screen, if this is possible, or so shall I share my screen maybe? Let's
I think perhaps if you share the screen, it might be easier.
Is it working? Can you see?
Yeah, we can see. Could you put it?
Yeah. Let me slide the show. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. And let me thank the Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction and my colleagues from UNDP Uzbekistan for this opportunity to engage. Actually, I was expecting to speak a little bit before our colleague Sabina from OFI and to set the scene for this new handbook that we will be launching soon, which is really about moving from metrics to policy. And I'm delighted, having worked 2 years in Uzbekistan, I'm delighted to see that Uzbekistan is engaging in measuring multidimensional poverty and ensure that the measurement is really specific to the context in Uzbekistan. So it might sound a bit redundant, but perhaps a couple of points. It seems okay. Okay, just because of course this handbook is part of a partnership, so I just would like to recall that UNDP, OFI, and sister agency have been working together to support the development of national MPIs in a number of countries and a number of middle-income countries, which is important to note as well, because poverty is not only an issue in least developed countries and poor countries, but around the globe. Right now, there are about 40 countries around the globe who have developed national MPIs. I think there was some highlights on this point on Sabina's presentation. So just to give a little bit of the background, actually, against the backdrop of the growing role of multidimensional poverty measurement and its use actually as a policy tool, and building on our growing experience in the field, so to speak, we launched a first handbook in 2019 that was really about guiding planners, policymakers, and statisticians on the measurement of the MPI. And the handbook is really providing details on how to set up and build support for developing an MPI, explaining the methodologies, and also the technical steps that need to be followed for an efficient and technically sound measures. Importantly also, and I think this could be of interest in the dynamic that is going on in Uzbekistan, we have also launched a massive online open course in 2020 based on this handbook actually. The training course is in its 3rd edition, and this year it engaged together over 2,800 participants from 156 countries. It was also rolled out in Russian. This is important to mention. So what's next? But the next is this. The next is really to see how countries can move from multidimensional poverty measurement to policy making. And I'll like to quote this from a handbook. The National Council for the Evaluation of Social Policy in Mexico say, and many others quotes, that we cannot improve what we cannot measure, but somehow metrics only make a difference if we use them in a systematic way to tackle the challenges that we have at hand, and not least poverty. So the point here is really to say that while the purpose of developing an MPI might not be fully clear at the beginning, at the very outset, it's still important to think forward about its potential use and all this at the very onset. So I think it's a little bit repeating what Sabina was just mentioning, but perhaps it's good to get back on this strategic entry point for using the MPIs in countries. What we see is that most countries have actually designed national MPIs with the main objective to complement monetary measurements, of course, and to monitor poverty reduction. And this includes for some countries tracking and reporting on SDG 122, which is relating to multidimensional poverty. And another forthcoming brief actually from UNDP and OFI reports that across the globe, 41 countries have reported on multidimensional poverty at the high-level political forum through the voluntary national reports. So, and that's every year 6 to 40% were specifically reporting using the MPI. But the fact is that countries have since then moved beyond monitoring or assessing poverty towards important practical use of the MPI to inform and improve policy making towards poverty reduction. And this is what this handbook, as was already illustrated by Sabina, is really looking at by providing in-depth, detailed, concrete examples on how the MPI was really used as a policy tool in a number of countries. And this includes really use related to the targeting of specific region groups of households. It means that basically the national MPI has been disaggregated at the subnational level as well to take into account potential pockets of poverty and multidimensional poverty. But also to target beneficiaries of social and other poverty reduction programs and prioritize programs and better allocate resources towards those sectors where deprivations faced by the population are highest. And as we know, and I think it was explained before, the proportion of overall poverty that is explained by a specific dimension can provide an indication of the share of the budget, for instance, that would need to be allocated to that particular sector. Important to know, to mention also that the MPI has been also very helpful in the context of the COVID-19 emergencies. It has been leveraged in a number of countries, including, for instance, Honduras, to expand the social protection response, for instance, to people that were not necessarily covered by social protection programs and other types of support, including many workers in the informal economy. So because it is multidimensional and with each dimension speaking to the specific sectors and ministries, and to specific sectors and ministries, the MPI can also help coordinating policies and managing multi-sectoral social and other policies, of course, depending on the set of deprivations that are included in the MPI. And this is really important because developing multi-sector programs that can reflect the overlapping and interconnected deprivations of people is very important, but also from a budget perspective, because it could save a lot of money if integrated packages of solutions are put in place, and that we avoid mismatches between needs and budget allocation and prevent possibly some overlapping of resources that would address the same needs. And this has been the case, as I think Sabina used the same picture, but this has been used, the approach has been used in Costa Rica, in Colombia, for instance, and the handbook is providing more details on the process behind coordination. In terms of coordination, it's very important. It's of course intersectoral coordination, but it's also about coordinating between national and subnational levels in countries, especially when the MPI has been disaggregated at the subnational level. This could really help make sure that no region and no one in the region, in specific regions, are left behind. So thank you so much for your attention. I hope this was sort of wrapping up a little bit also on these transitions from measurement, from metrics to policy. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And I know that we are running close to time, but I think that it's important that we also get the insights from Uzbekistan about how all of what we've heard in this session and today, how you think about how it can relate to the work that you do in the Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction and in the country as a whole. So with that, I leave for concluding remarks. We are very honored to have the first Deputy Minister of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction of the Republic of Uzbekistan here to give remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney, and apologies for being late. And anyway, I got, I think, very interesting points for myself. You know, again, the last presentation, which mentioned moving from metrics to policy, that's, you know, personally, that was in my mind after listening to Sabina's presentation early in the morning and several discussions. Yes, we started, and Munir knows, you know, maybe 2 years before, we didn't have a kind of anything. We started with some, you know, like a manual, and then some systemizing, and lots of questions are, you know, arising, and we are coming across and facing lots of issues. Is it the only that the government can, you know, use? Is it the only money that government can use to address families with low income or poor families, or are there any different sorts of social service, or are there any other factors that matter also, you know, and they play a very key role in elevating the families out of the poverty? And of course, you know, and I am also realizing that this is a third day forum. Actually, the first 2 days was about, probably you heard about the, you know, the evidence for policy making that was organized with, within the AGET program, but it's like a kind of a logical continuation of that. So, you know, this evidence that we can bring after, you know, implementing MPI, I'm based on our experience, you know, I can say that we can do a lot of improvement on effectiveness of our social policy. You know, we are just increased the coverage. Yeah, we are paying. I mean, the government is supporting financially the poor families, But what will be the benefit result? That's another thing, because I think we are having a good panel on balancing between the social support and the results. So the policies of social support, they have to have, some stimul and good results to bring the people out of the poverty. Otherwise, they have to be designed in a different way, or the money has to be channeled for different purpose. And all of this, my understanding is dependent on evidence collection, on more and good quality evidence, which can also be generated by implementing a multi-dimensional policy index. And it's my honor to have in our forum Dr. Al-Khair and other colleagues from your institution. So I think we will have a good cooperation in the future. And as you mentioned, there will be stories to tell about from our experience and to borrow from international experience. And in Uzbekistan, we have a very good, strong team of young researchers and young economists, and are also involved in the process of policy making. It's an institute which is led by Dr. Hakim, Dr. Abid Khajaev, and their team of young researchers. They are keen to working with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining, for speaking. I hope that it's been valuable and lots of exciting things to look forward to, it sounds like. So thank you. Have a good evening.